Southern Africa Coalition Democracy and Accountability Executive Director. That's Mr. Blessing Vava now via our video link. Thank you so much for your time on the program. So, Mr. Vava, what is at stake for Hichilema here as he begins a second term, particularly in rebuilding trust after such a bruising election contest?
Thank you for inviting me. I think what is at stake is how the country moves forward after having a very peaceful election. And sadly, we then had some ugly scenes where we had the premature declaration or announcement by the opposition, Mr. Brian Mindule, that he had won the election, which also led to the incitement, or should I say, the inflammation of tempers and the violence that we then witnessed. Unfortunately, there was a loss of life, and may the soul of the former Minister of Transport rest in peace. But what is important going forward is how President Hichilema is going to constitute his government, but also to make sure that the unfortunate incidents that we witnessed, especially after the voting, the unfortunate passing on of the former Minister of Transport, Honorable Kafwaya, is going to be held. In fact, I would say that President Hichilema needs to immediately, after he assumes, after his swearing in, institute a commission of inquiry to ascertain to the unfortunate incidents that we witnessed. But of course, we've heard that there were stories to do with the threat to national security, the accusations and counter-accusations of militia groups and stuff like that. But what is important is how is Zambia going to manage its economy. You know that the economy, when President Hichilema assumed office in 2021, the country had a high inflation of 24%, which he then managed to 6%, and also the strength of their currency, the kwacha, which has a bit gained versus major currencies in the region and in the world. So how is he going to be able to manage the economy? You know, the debt restructuring that he has embarked on in the past 5 years. But above all, to make sure that despite these economic reforms that have happened, that has made Zambia being a beacon of hope for many, is it going to translate into the pockets of the ordinary Zambians in Kafue, the ordinary Zambians in Copperbelt, in Solwezi, in Kalumbila, in Kitwe?
Yeah, and fast forward now, the opposition leader says, no, I reject these election results. Just how significant could the opposition's court challenge be? And what does it mean for Zambia's political stability going forward? And what are we likely to see unfold in the courts insofar as this is concerned?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I've been in Zambia for the past month, and I think that the environment has generally been peaceful as compared to the events that we've witnessed in other countries when there's an election. You know that across the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe, when there is an election, you know that there's going to be loss of life, there's going to be violence, you're likely going to see the opposition not campaigning. But what we saw in Zambia is a different ball altogether, where the opposition was at least managed to access different parts of the country without much hindrances. Of course, there were some incidents here and there, but that cannot constitute to anything significant that will deter the opposition from campaigning. But I think what is important is that to note also that the opposition leader, Mr. Brian Mindulile, pronounced himself that he won the elections barely 12 hours after the closure of polling, which I think that was a bit reckless, which I think that was also not within the confines of the constitution of the electoral laws of this country, in that it is the sole responsibility of the Electoral Commission of Zambia to announce the winner of elections. But also, surprisingly, we also, hours later, or a day later, the same guy, Mr. Brian Mindule, saying that calling for his polling agents to be able to collect the Gen 20 forms so that they also tally and make sure that they safeguard that. But we should be very worried, especially when such incidents happen, in that the whole electoral process was a bit, held at ransom, also because of those unfortunate incidents when an election was going on smoothly, the electoral process was going on smoothly, when it then led to the unfortunate incidents of violence that we heard that were happening at polling stations, which then forced the Electoral Commission of Zambia to halt the counting of, and the announcement of the results. But however, I also think that the halting of the counting then led to a bit of mistrust, because the Electoral Commission was not very clear in terms of when it's going to resume. Of course, they say that it's a 24-hour suspension, but you know how it is. It's a high-stakes game. Every Zambian who had participated in that election was expecting that results are going to come, hearing that the counting has been suspended. Of course, it raises a bit of suspicion, and it is then unfortunate that it has come to this day that we are experiencing now.
Certainly going to be keeping an eye out and just to see how that one unfolds. But I must thank you so much for your time and insights on the program this evening. That's for Southern Africa Coalition for Democracy and Accountability, Blessing Vava, who's the Executive Director there. Thanks so much indeed.